Good to have you guys. I want to welcome you, First Christian Church. This church has been here now, well, not in this location, but we've been in existence here in Nampa for almost 116 years. And you know, with the churches I've had, mostly on the East Coast, Jersey, New York. And I don't know why I'm sharing this, but starting a new church when I did in the Pittsburgh area was so much easier than helping a church that's been around for 100 plus years. Because you definitely have a way of doing things. And when you start with a blank slate, it's like, oh my gosh, we can try this or we can try that, and everyone's just kind of on board. But I love the tradition, and I'm old school in my heart when it comes to church. But I love the music. I'm so open to wherever we go and whatever we do, that as long as we're walking together and doing it with Christ and striving to give expression to his teachings in our living, we're going to be okay, you know? It's the spiritual dimension. It's our relationship with each other. More than the religiosity, it's our relationships. And taking time to get to know each other's story, because we all have a story that is precious and is invaluable. And if we take the time to listen, we're going to learn from each other, and we're going to grow, and we're going to continue to be that light, that community that God's Son gave his life for. So I thank each and every one of you just for the stories that you have, and I hope and feel that you will find a place here where you can share your story, and it will be honored, and you will be embraced simply for who you are. I really hope and pray that we can continue to be that kind of community. Okay? All right. But I want to spend and really just retell the story. We're just going to be knee-deep in the scripture and the story for those Sundays leading up to Lent. Okay? I'm just feeling it. I really would love to be able to do that, and just letting you know that. So I will get back to finishing out the series after Easter on the human soul, but today, suffice it to say, we're still going to continue with that series and see where we go today. You guys okay? Yeah? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. You know, at times, believe it or not, I get frustrated. I do. I get impatient. I get preoccupied. Sometimes I feel like there's so much to do, and obviously not enough time to do it. You ever felt that way? I mean, yeah. And I obsess with all the external things that need to be done. And I work under the assumption that my inner world will be filled with peace and joy once my external world is perfect. And that's a great recipe for a healthy soul if the world was perfect. 10 years ago, and I'm not saying this to remind you of it, but I guess I am. 10 years ago, I was on sabbatical, okay? And during that time away, I ruthlessly eliminated hurry from my life. And I found out, it's kind of sad, I found out that I'm a much better person on sabbatical when I was in Israel for those 3 months than when I'm working for God at the church. And that's just plain wrong. That's just plain wrong. And also on sabbatical, I've realized that I have a tendency to get frustrated when the church's level of spiritual growth is not healthy. And I immediately begin to think, my knee-jerk reaction is, okay, what book do I need to have people read? What sermon series do I need to do? What program do we have to undertake to deal with our spiritual growth? Just got to take control of it, right? And that's not a good thing either. Because it dawned on me, the main thing I can give to the church is the main thing I give to God. And that is the person that I am becoming. And it goes for you guys as well. If my soul is unhealthy, I can't be of much help to anyone. Okay? I'm responsible for the health of my soul. Yes, we are to help each other take care of our souls, but ultimately I am responsible for the health of my soul. And the same is for each of us. You and no one else is ultimately responsible for the condition of your soul. That is the first rule of thumb, okay, for the human soul. In the ancient world, there was the common belief that the sins of the parents would be visited upon their children. And there was confusion about, okay, well then who's responsible for that person's soul? Ezekiel, the prophet, in chapter 18, beginning with verse 2, essentially says, enough with that kind of thinking, people of Israel. And he says this phrase, the fathers eat sour grapes, and the children's teeth are put on edge. That is what the father does. It affects the child. Okay. And Ezekiel says, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, you'll no longer quote this proverb. For every living soul belongs to me, the parent and the child. The soul who sins is the one who will die. In other words, you have responsibility for your soul. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 7, the Apostle Paul says this, that a basic rule of thumb for the human soul is essentially, the second rule of thumb here, is you reap what you sow. That's what Paul says in Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. Many of us, though, myself included, live like the law of consequence doesn't apply to our lives. Okay. I can spend money without getting in debt. I can lie without getting caught. I can let my temper fly and not have relationships be damaged. I can have a bad attitude and get away with it. I can avoid disciplining my children without them getting spoiled. I can neglect the Bible and not have and still know God and have a relationship with God. Our capacity to live in denial of the law of consequences is huge and damaging to the human soul. Bear with me now. In the book of Judges, in the Hebrew Scriptures, in the Old Testament, is an obscure story that God reveals this second rule of thumb for the human soul, that you reap what you sow. Let's look at this story. Joshua, he was commander and leader of the people as they entered into the promised land after they'd been in the wilderness for 40 years. And Joshua dies, but the promised land still is not yet a place of peace. There are still tribes and other cultures, other armies living in the land of Canaan. Okay, and battles still need to be fought. And as the book of Judges begins in the first chapter, it begins with the people of Israel battling against the Canaanites and the Perizzites at a place called Bezek. And I'll pick it up here, Judges chapter 1, verses 4 through 7. They came, the people of Israel, came upon Adoni-Bezek at Bezek and fought against him and defeated the Canaanites and Perizzites. Adoni-Bezek fled, but they pursued him. And they caught him, and they cut off his thumbs and his big toes. Adoni-Bezek said, I've cut off the thumbs and big toes of 70 kings and had them pick up scraps under my table. Now God has paid me back for what I did to them. Curious story. Here's a Canaanite king, okay? Adoni-Bezek. Actually, Adoni-Bezek means Lord of Lightning, okay? Whatever it's worth. He was a notorious and cruel leader, according to Scripture here. It's what we can only go with. And when he defeated others, he would cut off their thumbs and their big toes of their kings, and then have those kings eat like dogs under the table where he dined. He did this to 70 other kings. Adoni-Bezek's reign over other kingdoms was called the rule of thumb. Actually, it's not true, but I thought that sounded kind of fun, the rule of thumb. Because he ruled over them and they didn't have thumbs. But it's true that these kings lived under the thumb of Bezek. I mean, it's true. And what's really sad from what we understand with these 70 kings, that when they traveled, they always had to walk because they couldn't thumb a ride. No, they couldn't. And they had a hard time expressing their displeasure to others because they couldn't thumb their nose at people. Oh, yeah. But a positive thing about these kings is all true. The positive thing about these kings is that even though they could have been awkward, they could never be accused of being all thumbs. Yeah, no, they couldn't. And they had a very hard life. They were terrible gardeners because they didn't have a green. Yeah, you know the story, don't you? There was great irony about them because even though they didn't have thumbs, they stuck out like a sore. Yeah, you know that too, right? All 70 of these kings became very impatient individuals because they could not pass the time twiddling there. No, poor guys. But they deserve a thumbs up. They do. At least they didn't have to worry about infected thumbnails or anything like that. They could forget about chopsticks or flipping a coin. But beyond that, they really couldn't soothe themselves because sucking a pinky just doesn't work well. Right? Right, I'm just saying. All right, it's just something to think about, okay? Believe it, I'm going on now. Believe it or not, there's truth, though, in this story that is basic to having a healthy soul. It's true. Adoni-Bezek's signature move of cutting off thumbs and big toes is done to him, right? In the story, it's interesting, though. He doesn't blame Israel. He says, what I've done to others, God now has done to me. No, I'm not jiving on that kind of theology, Bezek, okay? But he has done things in this world like cutting off thumbs, and the world has come back and bit him, and his thumbs are now gone. So there's very much this, he is reaping what he has sown in this world. And the Apostle Paul in Galatians 6:7 is very clear. Do not be deceived. God will not be mocked. A person reaps what they have sown. And this is true within our soul. A soul not properly kept will surely die. Ezekiel 18:20. So we have some rules of thumb for the human soul. You're the keeper of your soul. You reap what you sow. And the third one is the soul needs to be centered in God. Okay, and we're going to take this apart here for a moment. Here are a few indicators of what a human soul looks like when it's not centered on God. A soul without a center in God has difficulty making a decision. James chapter 1, verse 6 says, an uncentered soul is like a wave in the ocean that goes hither and yon. Is driven forward one moment and driven backwards another moment. You just can't make a decision. A perfect example of an uncentered soul would be Pontius Pilate at Jesus' trial. Pontius Pilate, he was trying to, he didn't even know what decision to make with regard to Jesus. He had the authority, but would not make a decision. He tries to get Jesus to recant Tell me that you're the Messiah. And Jesus just responds, you say that I am. But Jesus doesn't give him enough there. So Pontius is like going back and forth. He pesters the religious leaders. He turns to the people, right? What do you want me to do with Jesus? He's an uncentered soul. He's a waffling soul. And that's a very dangerous thing to have, especially if you're in a position of power like Pontius Pilate. A waffling politician. Imagine a soul without a center, with God as the center, will also feel constantly vulnerable to people and circumstances. When David fled his son, Absalom, he ran away from his son, Absalom. Absalom is actually seeking his father's death. We see this story in 2 Samuel 16. David runs and he's hiding, he's exhausted, and he has to stop at one moment to rest. And the Hebrew word for rest is to re-soul himself, to get back in touch with his soul. We also see this in the story of Elijah, 1 Kings chapter 18 and 19, when Queen Jezebel is seeking his life. He's threatened, and Elijah runs and he hides, and God gives Elijah some rest and some food, and he allows Elijah once again to re-soul, to get back in touch with his soul, to recenter himself, and to be able then to listen to that still small voice of God that would come to him. A soul without a center lacks patience. Numbers chapter 21, verse 4, we hear of the people of Israel in the wilderness, and their souls are said to have grown short. That is, they have become impatient with God in the wilderness. Judges 13 through 16, we hear of the story of Samson. And he has a soul that is not centered on God. He rambles about, his soul does, from pursuing power to pursuing women to pursuing revenge. And the nagging of one single woman is enough to, according to Scripture, to make Samuel's soul grow short. That is, to grow impatient. That's Samuel, or Judges 16, verse 16. Job, on the other hand, in the book of Job, is said to be long-souled, ever patient with God, despite the circumstances, despite the tragedy in his life. Though he railed and ranted at God, he did not give up on God because he was long-souled. He was patient. King Saul, on the other hand, was a big man physically, but he was said to have a short soul. In 1 Samuel chapter 13, 8, Saul was about to go into battle, and he was waiting somewhat impatiently for the prophet Samuel to come to him to do a sacrifice before he went into battle so he could have God's favor. But Saul grew impatient, and for waiting for Samuel, so Saul just went ahead and did the sacrifice anyway, and really ended up breaking his covenant, his relationship with God, because he was not patient enough to wait for the prophet of God, Samuel, to come to him before the war. If you grow overly impatient in traffic or in long lines, or you often feel you're in a hurry to get somewhere, which I constantly am, those are potentially good indicators that your soul is not quite yet centered in the home of God. I'm still working at it, folks. I'll be honest. Dallas Willard, author and theologian who I often quote, said, "There's nothing in a person that seems so intent upon God as the soul. The soul seeks the mighty one as though God is the soul's own home, as though it can only be at home with God." And Job says, in God's hand is the soul of every living being. Job chapter 12, verse 10. The soul not centered on God is easily thrown. And I'll give you a story on this one. I was in Indianapolis in 1994, undertaking some training with a couple of mentors of mine to do a new church startup in Pittsburgh. Anyway, I went there with my two mentors, and we went to a bar in Indianapolis one evening, and at this bar was a mechanical bull. Never been on one, right? And the man who was operating it in the back of the bar there said, he says, it's not nearly as fun watching as riding. And of course, my mentors, they were about my age, were saying, go for it, Steve, go for it. And I'm thinking, I've never had Rodeo 101 in seminary at Vanderbilt, but why not? So the operator of this mechanical bull took one look at me and said, you sure? And I said, yeah, I wasn't going to back down at that point. And, my two mentors there, I'm going to ride this bull. And he said to me, what I can remember what he said to me, he said, there are 12 levels, okay, of difficulty. And it might be harder than you think. I remember him saying that. And he said, stay centered and stay loose. He said, people will try to clamp down really tight. And he said, you got to be flexible. If you think you can be in control, you will never make it. You have to follow the bull. Keep moving. Shift your center of gravity as the bull moves. So I got on it. Sat on it. Started slow. Then got a little faster. Okay. I held real tight at first. Then I remembered, no. Got to hang loose with it. Move with the bull. And it started moving faster and started jostling a bit and bucking and jumping a bit. I started hanging sideways a bit. My arms started to flail just a little. But I hung on. And the bull slowed down. Yeah. And it stopped. And I was still on the bull. I was proud of myself. Yeah. I figured the operator would be surprised too that I used, even though I was some city boy, that I used my urban cowboy sensibilities to stay on that bull, right? And he smiled and said that was level 1. And I lasted about 2 seconds on level 2, okay? I was thrown. Sometimes you think about it, life is, how do I want to put it? Life is often like level 1, right? Going smooth, and you're kind of going with it. It can get a little wavy, but you hang in there. Kind of like Mayberry in the Andy Griffith Show, right? Who's familiar with Andy Griffith? I hope you are. If you're not, I'm so sorry. But life, in Mayberry at level 1 just kind of shuffles along without any major complications. Oh, Aunt B may make some pickles that taste terrible, or Opie may end up shooting a mother bird and feel really bad about it. All in all, though, life's manageable, simple, uncomplicated. But life doesn't stay at level 1. You ever figured that out? Gets complicated and stuff happens. It turns out, like Opie, has an anxiety disorder, or Aunt B has to go into detox because she's hooked on pickle juice, or Andy is working a moonshine on the side. People in Mayberry then will get their faith rattled a bit with doubts, and people will then often begin to betray each other and talk behind each other's back. And a lack of trust will quickly prevail in Mayberry. If your soul isn't centered on God at such moments, when life comes at you fast, you will be thrown off that bull of life, okay? Especially if you're trying to hold on too tightly to level 1 when life is actually at a level 10. It's like, this isn't what the pastor said. I thought everything's going to be hunky-dory if I just had faith in Jesus, and I just love Jesus, and I just do this, and I do X, Y, and Z, and do what the church says. How come I'm experiencing all of this? Yeah, you go through that line of thinking if you think life is supposed to be level 1 if you're following Jesus. Talk to Jesus about level 1 on the cross, okay? Sorry, ain't happening. And there are two enemies that lead a soul to be thrown and disconnected from God. And the first one's very evident. It's sin, right? Sin cannot coexist with a God-centered soul. It just can't. Indulge in bitterness, indulge in deceit, indulge in lust, and you're choosing not to center on God. And the other enemy that often has our soul get thrown, or assists our soul in getting thrown, are just troublesome thoughts. Not necessarily sin, okay, but pervasive thoughts. It's a way of thinking that doesn't take God into account. For example, you open your quarterly statement and you see that your 401k has lost money. Okay, and then you begin to think, well, I have enough to retire on. What if the next quarterly posts another loss? Do I pull my money out? Such thoughts begin to squeeze God out for some of us. It's okay to pay attention to your retirement account, okay? But leave God out and your soul can quickly lose its center. A soul disconnected from God is like a fish on the banks of a river. Eventually it dies off because, right, it's just cut off from the flow and the source of life. The soul needs to be in that flow. It needs to be centered in God. Let me apply some of these soul lessons, if you will, using Lazarus for an illustration. And I'm not talking about Lazarus in the Bible. I'm talking about Lazarus, the church's goldfish. Okay? And I shared this story with some of you, it's been about 8-9 years ago. I was trying to look it up on my computer, doing a word search. It was like 8 or 9 years ago, I shared the story of Lazarus, our church's goldfish. But I'm going to share this story here in a different way to apply some of these lessons about the human soul. Hang with me, all right? Just hang. The first time I changed water for our church's goldfish, I remember putting the fish in the water, and it was just moving around crazy. It's just like, it was literally, the goldfishes would like jump out of the water and back in. And I was like, he must really love this water, he's so happy. And then Destiny, who was then our church administrator, put her finger in the water and said, "Steve, it's hot water." And I said, well, it's overly warm, I think, I like hot showers, right? Kills germs. But goldfish don't like warm or certainly don't like hot water. When your soul is not centered on God, you tend to focus on yourself. I like hot showers. Obviously, this goldfish must like hot water as well. I took him out thinking, oh no, I'm killing this fish. So I blew on the fish, and I shook him, and I put some cold water on him underneath the sink in the bathroom. And I kept blowing, and he came back. Because he was just like, wasn't doing anything. Thus, we gave him the name of Lazarus, because he came back. But there was another occasion I was cleaning the tank. And I was in a hurry, right? Restless soul that I am. And I was putting in some water conditioner, 10 drops for every gallon of water. But the drops just were not coming out quickly. So I squeezed the bottle a little too hard, and the whole top came off. And the whole bottle of conditioner went into the water. Once again, there goes Lazarus like he's taking in, 5-hour energy drink. He's just all over the place. So I take him out again, put him under cold water, blow on him, shake him, whatever. He's good to go. But a soul without patience, come on, drip, 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 drip. A soul without patience that's in a hurry can lead to disregarding the well-being of others, as I did for Lazarus. My time was more important, So the poor guy gets what he gets in his water. Another occasion, I was cleaning a tank, and it was about 11 o'clock at night. I was here in the office. And the phone rang, and it startled me. I'm not expecting people to call the church at 11 o'clock at night. And I was pulling out the dirty filter in the back, and I got startled by the phone, and I dropped it into the water, that filter. And immediately the water went black. And I'm thinking, Lazarus, where are you, buddy? I know you're in here. And I'm looking all around for him. I'm trying to feel for him. I can't find him. I panicked. I finally get him out. And reached out. And he was just he was just covered in this soot, right? So I run into the bathroom. I put him water under the sink. And I'm once again shaking him. And then no, he needs standing water. So I put him in the toilet. Toilet was at least it had been flushed. But he was just floated down. I think, oh no, I'm going to lose him. So I had to reach in and get him out before he fell all the way down into the toilet. And so I get him and I put him back in the sink. But I was just back and forth. A soul that is uncentered has difficulty making a decision. Sink, toilet, sink. So what do I do? Where is he? Lazarus, you should know, was special needs. Okay? He had only one fin, bless his heart. He swam in a circle all the time. And what he'd often do, he'd spin around real quick, and then he'd do this dead fish float, and he'd just go to the bottom of the tank. And then he'd spin again real quick, and go down again. That was typical Lazarus behavior, okay? And when he did that, though, more often than not, I would take him out, because I knew he was struggling for some reason, and I'd give him a salt bath. I put him in some salt water for about 5 minutes or so. I did this once, and I put him in that little salt bath because he was doing that a lot, the dead fish float. And phone rang. I got distracted. I ended up leaving him in that salt bath for 50 minutes rather than 5. A soul not centered on God loses its focus. That particular salt bath did not perk Lazarus up, okay? It pickled him. I didn't know what to do. I felt so bad. I was unable to bury him in the churchyard or flush him. I couldn't flush him. So I put him in some Tupperware here at the church, filled it up with water, and put it in the freezer. And he's still there to this day, 8-9 years later, in the fireside room. Right? He is there. Now, every time I open up that freezer in the fireside room, I remember what happens when you get sidetracked from what's really important. Lazarus was my priority. He should have been my priority, and I let him down. I thought we had a good relationship. I don't know what he felt from his point of view, right? But the same can be said about our souls. We get sidetracked from God, and other matters become our focus. A soul not centered on God can bring death into this world, spiritual and physical death. I can't overstate that. And I'll end with this, okay? When I went on sabbatical, I figured I'd discover ways to improve this church. And I came away with the reality that I had little to offer till I tended to the needs of my soul. And it's my job to encourage you guys to do the same, to take care of your souls, and to remember these 3 rules of thumb, if you will. You and no one else is ultimately responsible for the condition of your soul. Take care of yourselves. 2, a person does reap what they sow in this world. It is a world of consequences. Remember that. Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. And your soul needs to be centered upon God. Rules of thumb that, God willing, will one day truly rule over our heart and our mind and our body, and yes, our soul. Amen. Let us pray. Heavenly God, I give you thanks for your Son, for his life and his ministry. I give you thanks for your word as it comes to us, that there are rules of thumb that we need to take heed of within Scripture itself. And we need to stay centered on you. Help us just to continue to intentionally stay connected and build that relationship we have with you. May we choose in our freedom to honor you, to be centered in your spirit and in your love. And may you guide our soul to be patient, to be uncluttered, to focus on what is truly important in this world, and to build those relationships of life and love that give you the glory. We ask this in your Son's name. Amen.